can have it afterwards. Great, Benjamin. So we are all set and ready to start whenever you are ready.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're listening. I am delighted to welcome you to the second conference that we are presenting in partnership with UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, this week, dedicated to arts and culture and arts and cultural education. I'm very happy to and proud to be leading the Global Foundation for the Performing Arts. We have partnered with UNITAR and the United Nations to highlight and advocate for the importance of culture and the performing arts in society. And in order to do that, we advocate in various ways. We have discussions such as this, and we are forming partnerships with educational and training institutions to develop programs to highlight culture and intercultural training. Yesterday, we had a chance to hear from our first partner institution, the Longji School of Music of Bard College, going into a deep dive related to all things to do with teaching, healing, and the power of music. And we learned in detail about their initiatives and programs about training music teachers to adapt and respond to teaching in culturally relevant situations and culturally relevant training techniques to enhance musicians to become better teachers and to impart more than just musical training, but to impart self-confidence, development, professional development in their students and also in their communities. We saw amazing stories of students working with inmates in prisons, with performing music in ICU centers with critically ill patients, and with patients towards the end of life experience and relieving aspects of dementia and cognitive memory. So I was very happy to host yesterday's session, which was really dedicated to alternative futures for music. And today we continue our discussion about arts education more broadly. And rather than focusing on one institution and its work, I'm delighted to be welcoming a number of speakers today who all practice education, training, mentorship, advice, guidance for young artists in various ways. Today's title is Arts Education Forward Thinking, and we're presenting this in partnership with UNITAR. And I'm really going to open the floor in a moment to discussion. It will be a discussion format for the next 2 hours. And we do invite questions from registrants who have registered for this session. And we'll hold the questions towards the second half of the conversation. Today's forum is really an opportunity to discuss and hear from a range of leaders and visionaries in this broad cultural education space. We can reflect on aspects of education and mentorship, including professional development. You know, I want us today to talk about academic theory and real world practice. I think the two are incredibly important to ensure that we have active performing artists who are playing vibrant roles in our society. We can consider things such as, have educational models changed since COVID? Are the needs of students changing? How are you delivering models of training in a hybrid world? And do you have predictions about what type of education students or young artists are needing to have fulfilling careers and to be fulfilled artists going forward? I'm very honored to be joined by a great group of colleagues and friends for today's discussion. In alphabetical order, I'll just outline who is joining us today on the panel. We're being welcomed by is Tanya Bannister, who is president of Concert Artists Guild, which is based in New York. Hello, Tanya. We're joined by Professor Dr. Stefan Frucht, who's the artistic director of the Siemens Arts Program in Berlin. Hi, Stefan. We're joined by Stephen Mccomb, who's the director of the Academy at the Verbier Festival in Switzerland. Professor Bill Quillen, who's Dean of the Conservatory at Oberlin College and Conservatory in Oberlin, US. Delighted to welcome Professor Andrea Rurale, who's director of the MAMA program at SDA Bocconi in Milano in Italy. Thank you, Andrea, for joining us, especially for joining us in your vacation. I really appreciate it. And finally, but not least, Professor Dr. Sheila Woodward, who's the executive vice president of the International Music Council, which is based in Paris, and professor of music and director of music education at the Eastern Washington University in Washington State in the US. Thank you, Sheila, in particular, for joining us at a very early hour. To get this started, what I will be doing is introducing each panelist and letting them speak for a little while to hear more about their experience and their, I guess, place of work and their reality and what they're doing in their space for education towards culture in its broadest sense. And then I'll invite discussion. So the discussion is not only, of course, through the registrants who are on this listening in, but it's also between the speakers. So I really encourage anyone who's on the call today to use the chat room to put forward questions, and I will do my best to go back in and out of the chat room to ensure that we address what we can during the time we have today. We're going to eventually put this conversation up on the UNITAR site. So, please, I guess, bear that in mind. But also, I also want to emphasize that I'm really grateful for UNITAR for advocating for culture in the way we do, and for highlighting the importance of culture in addition to the work you do with other subjects and other sectors in civilian life, such as conflict resolution, international law, trade, development, and now we're adding culture to your suite of offerings. So thank you for putting us front and center with other major movers and shakers. I've decided in random order who I'm going to go with to introduce in terms of speakers. And I think it would be most wise to go with the person that joined this panel first and open the login the first. So I'm going to start with Professor William or Bill Quillen. Bill, I'll introduce you before I invite you to say a few words and put your story into context so the audience can have a better idea of your place and your vision and your work. Bill Quillen has served as Dean of the Oberlin Conservatory of Music and Professor of Musicology since January 2020. Before his appointment as Dean, he served as Oberlin Conservatory's Acting Dean and Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. During his time at Oberlin, he has helped lead a variety of strategic initiatives, including the Presidential Initiative on Racial Equity and Diversity, for which he served as co-chair, and the institution-wide strategic review resulting in the One Oberlin Plan, for which he served as vice chair, and which has helped birth a variety of curricular and programmatic innovations across the institution, including multiple new academic programs in the conservatory. As a musicologist, Bill's specialities include Russian music, 20th and 21st century music, and the sociology of music. He's taught at the Uni of California, Berkeley, where he completed his PhD in musicology, and at the University of Cambridge as a research fellow of Clare College. He's also studied at the Moscow Conservatory on a Fulbright grant. His work has been published in the Journal of the American Musicological Society and Music and Letters, among other forums. Before moving to Oberlin, Bill worked in the administrations of the San Francisco Conservatory, Berkeley Symphony, San Francisco Contemporary Music Players, and the San Francisco Symphony. And he's a former tubist, completing his undergraduate studies in tuba and history at Indiana University in Bloomington. Bill, good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this discussion today. I think you are uniquely placed, I'll just start with a question, because you actually are Dean of Conservatory in a college and a conservatory setting. Would you like to talk to that and perhaps the unique experience that Oberlin provides?
Yeah. Thank you, Benjamin. And first of all, greetings, everyone. Greetings from Oberlin, Ohio, from Northern Ohio. And it's wonderful to be together and really looking forward to this conversation. Perhaps I should have logged on a little bit later, Benjamin. Jokes aside, when you said whoever logs in first speaks first, jokes aside, though, it is a pleasure and a joy and an honor to be together and to kick off the conversation. As Benjamin mentioned, here at Oberlin, one of the interesting elements at Oberlin, just to sort of speak to my kind of distinctive position today, as Benjamin said, we're a conservatory of music, but that it's fully partnered with a liberal arts college. And a liberal arts college, of course, is, although there are models outside of America, it's a particularly important part of the higher educational ecosystem in America. And one of the distinctive features about them is that they're undergraduate focused. And so here at Oberlin Conservatory, one of the most important things at Oberlin Conservatory is we are almost exclusively undergraduate. And that's one of the things in our peer group that's distinctive, because virtually all of our competitor or peer institutions are both undergraduate and graduate level. We're 100% undergraduate, and that brings with it certain challenges, but also certain opportunities. One of the elements about that undergraduate focus, we have students arriving at a very particular point. They come to us when they're 18 years old, and one of the things is I think about this, and they're with us for 4 or 5 years. They're either doing the undergraduate in the conservatory or doing a double degree in the college. And one of the reasons I make that observation is that, oftentimes one of the things I've observed relative to the theme of today's panel is, so many of the prospective students coming in, and I speak here from firsthand experience as a young tubist who, went off to music school, mastering all the sort of orchestral excerpts. The sort of oftentimes students arrive, obviously very committed to orchestral excerpts and things like that, which is wonderful and good and beautiful. And then I think I reflect a lot about my experiences when I go out and talk to our alumni all over the nation and all over the world. And oftentimes there's a sense of, all the things I didn't learn in conservatory that I wish I knew. Very often, which usually have virtually nothing and oftentimes nothing at all to do with, repertoire and technique. But many, many other things. Sometimes actual sort of like nuts and bolts of having a career. Sometimes it's just habits of mind and ways of being in the world. And that's one of the things we look forward to talking about today. I mean, one of the things that's really particular about our program that we try to cultivate here is a sense of lifelong curiosity, a sense of openness, a sense of creativity. Our students are only here for 4 or 5 years. I mean, a blip in their lifespan. There's no way we're going to teach them everything by any stretch, or is that our aspiration? But we try to inculcate in them a certain a disposition and a habit in the world, a way of being intellectually and artistically curious, and particularly at this moment in time where the shifts toward omnivorousness, the changes in cultural consumption, so on and so forth, now more than ever demand that. So all of this is to say, we have a program that we are always looking to sort of facilitate that mix of, yes, musical mastering technique, but much more intellectual and artistic curiosity in the world, to be an artist with something to say. I'll just say, as one who sort of spends his everyday life, working with 18 to 21-year-olds, training them to then go into the profession, for me, opportunities like this are particularly interesting to then gather with practitioners in the profession, the sorts of organizations that we're training our students to enter into. So to that end, I look forward to this colloquy in particular, in a very personal level on that front. So that's the sort of 30 plus second introduction from Oberlin, and I greatly look forward to today's conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bill. I can see, because of course, you know, we are focusing today on cultural education and performing arts education, but the bulk of the people on this panel have classical music experience, or in the classical music space, myself included. But there are analogies between different performing arts disciplines and the educational and traditional training practices of each discipline. I think that point about preparing students for ongoing curiosity is vital, and there's only so much that a conservatory context can teach. COVID changed many things. The information and skills that you're providing your students, did that change, or did what you needed to provide change, or did they change their questions of what they wanted from you, or did you predict the future and jump in and tell them in advance what they're going to need? I mean, I'd really like to explore that symbiosis between what students need and what teachers need, and how that's expressed or communicated between the two camps.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an ongoing dialogue, of course, ongoing sort of dialectic that lives in a sort of creative tension. And the COVID example is an interesting one, because like as is the case with institutions and organizations everywhere, our entire way of being in the world transformed pretty suddenly overnight. There's a joke sometimes told in the academy, that overnight professors went from saying I'll never teach online to saying I'll never go in a classroom again. But all of a sudden we transformed pretty dramatically. I don't mean we, Oberlin, I mean the sector. What I would say here at Oberlin, just to sort of like illustrate things specifically, some of the ways that COVID helped catalyze certain changes underway. We completely remade our large ensemble program during COVID. Now, that was something that we're already doing for curricular and pedagogical and programmatic reasons, but COVID catalyzed that. So what I mean is, we've changed our large ensemble program where it's no longer structured so fundamentally around the symphony orchestras, the standing defined genre. And we did that. We were already underway for pedagogical reasons, to better prepare students for the kinds of actual performing experiences that they will, be doing day in, day out when they enter the profession. We did it to lead to our greater diversification of repertoire and much greater compositional diversity of the kinds of composers that were playing. So we're doing it for all these reasons, but then COVID came on also, and there was, on top of everything else, this epidemiological sort of imperative. And in fact, in many regards, COVID, we were sort of agonizing over how to do this thing logistically. And then COVID came through and we had no choice but to rip the Band-Aid off and reinvent everything from the ground up. And we've kept it in place because for all the pedagogical and ethical and philosophical reasons that I spoke to. So that's an example saying all the way that these various sorts of forces have intersected and interacted over the years. And there's many other cases I could point to throughout the curriculum where it's a similar sorts of things, where these external events, COVID, great intensification, wonderfully so, of the national, in the case of the US, but international dialogues about racial equity, that a lot of these elements came together with things we're already working on internally to help catalyze the transformation underway in our curriculum and our programs. And I think that just the final thing too, is a big topic, but I think also just the ongoing shift of the melding of this mixed media interdisciplinary world, as all of a sudden, all of the media that we consume is increasingly visually mediated, not just sound. In the case of music, for example, virtually all of us started experiencing music, not just orally, but through greater visual mediation. And that's fundamentally changed a lot of expectations among our students and our consumers and so on and so forth. So there's many threads to this, but yes, I think that I personally believe COVID poured gasoline on and just tremendously accelerated a lot of the trends underway. And I think it's a fundamental change, and I don't think it's going back to a status quo ante, but I actually think that there's just tremendous opportunity ahead. My question is always, can we as institutions adapt quickly enough? Because institutions tend to resist change. There's inertia built in. That's the definition of an institution in many regards.
You read my mind. I'd just written down, can institutions flex? And can they flex fast enough? But perhaps it's to do with size and attitude and scale and all sorts of factors and age. But your school has been around for a long time. So
we're small and we're private, which in the US case, private public is a big distinction. And in the US case, public meaning state, as opposed to how that term is used some other places in the globe. But we're a private institution, we're relatively small. And we also have, our particular institution has, and this is another advantage that we have for the moment, is that we have a sort of a history of progressivism built into the DNA of the school. I mean, Oberlin was the first predominantly white institution to admit to go fully colorblind in admissions in the 19th century, the first to go co-educational and admit women. It has this sort of progressivism built into the core, which has been very beneficial, which leads into it in the kind of culture of the institution, a willingness to try new things. And so in that regard, it's wonderful. But again, though, in general, we see this not just academia or culture, but business and so on. I mean, organizations, our institutions are often slow to adapt just because of the nature of institutions. And the rapidity of change is only increasing.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Bill. We do have a question that I'm going to just put out there, but I don't want anybody to answer it yet. I just want to put it out there and everybody to sort of think about it. And maybe some of you might want to respond to it a little bit later. But somebody has asked a very relevant question. Is it possible to really teach curiosity? I'm just going to leave that up here for a little while and let the panel think about that. I'd like to move to Tanya Bannister, and it makes a lot of sense because Tanya, in many ways, you're working with the students that are graduating from institutions, from conservatories and so forth. And before I hand over to you, I'll introduce you properly and put your story into context. Tanya Bannister is president of Concert Artists Guild, which is based in New York in the US. And as president of Concert Artists Guild, Tanya actively steers young musicians toward becoming thoughtful citizen musicians. Now, that's actually a term we discussed yesterday, so I'm really impressed that we're carrying this through. Under her leadership, Concert Artists Guild is launching Citizen Musician Bootcamp, which trains emerging musical artists and creates meaningful conversations about what it is to be an impactful musician today. Ms. Bannister won the Concert Artists Guild International Competition and the New Orleans International Piano Competition, which confirmed her status among the leading pianists of her generation. She has directed her musical gifts and entrepreneurial passion towards philanthropic projects, such as forming Pianists for New Orleans, in which she joined forces with 3 previous winners of the New Orleans International Piano Competition to raise $100,000 for the Musical Arts Society of New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. She also created a live recital CD with renowned ethnobotanist Paul Allen Cox, which raised funds to support children on the ravaged remote island of Oshima, who survived the devastating tsunami in Japan. Tanya, I open the floor to you. You are helping and perhaps guiding and letting musicians who've graduated be whatever they're going to be in the next step. How important is that role for you?
The role of philanthropist?
The role of, I guess, mentor, as guider.
Yes. Well, that's a very good question. And actually, Concert Artists Guild is a nonprofit that, gives top young musicians management, launching of their career. And now, since I've become president of the organization 4 years ago, very robust professional development, which we are branding in Citizen Musicians Bootcamp. And actually, we don't just have graduating students, we have musicians from the age of 18 to 30. So we have a unique kind of position through our applications to our, the way musicians enter our roster is through an annual competition. And actually the last few years, we've changed the format of that so that the the entry into the competition is already kind of a teaching opportunity, in the sense that we ask musicians, you know, what their idea of music is beyond the concert hall. We ask for specific, unique programming that they're interested in. Obviously, you know, these things take time to develop. And we have conversations with them throughout the you know, application. So we get applications from all over the world, and we see the level of how prepared and what, you know, the mentality of a lot of young musicians today, particularly obviously in the classical field. And it's getting slightly better, but I have to say it's not where it needs to be. I think that because of the level of just difficulty and the number of hours that needs to go into becoming a, you know, proficient and compelling musician, I think that the mentality of most musicians is pleasing in an apprentice type way to a teacher, to an institution, to their colleagues, and often they don't think empathetically towards a broader audience, which is obviously the conversation we're all having now. How do we reach, you know, beyond this very narrow, you know, we don't like even to classify classical music, world music, you know, there are so, we want it to just be broader. And I think it's an incredible opportunity because, you know, especially with the world the way it is now, I think there's a huge opportunity and to me, an absolute need for thoughtful musicians, because music transcends, you know, obviously political, you know, affiliations and language in all the ways that we all know. So yes, I think it's absolutely critical now to have this conversation, to change the way institutions and not smaller nonprofits like ours, and, you know, even, you know, what you're doing, Benjamin, it has to be faster because there are so many people graduating and the opportunity is being lost, because even at the highest level, I have to say, it's a little bit, they're not thinking beyond a very narrow platform to really capitalize on their talents.
I'm putting aside my own personal experience in this space, having run classical music competitions for a number of years and then working in that space for a number of years. I'm aware of this transition space between graduation and career. But I want to touch a bit further on how easy is it to make a prodigy more thoughtful? How do you?
I mean, I personally think there needs to be professional development for parents and teachers, because honestly, you know, it has to start really young, and the parents have a huge say in how young people develop with curiosity, answering that question, and not having right or wrong and informational kind of just memorization of type education. You know, they have to learn to make mistakes. They have to learn to create in ways that it don't exist yet, you know, and that's really hard because, you know, people don't like to be outside their comfort zone particularly. So, and I also think, you know, especially as they get older, that professors and teachers and classroom teachers need to be actively in the same boat, getting out of their comfort zone and having these conversations and being trained also, because it's, you know, even as someone leading the organization, it's really not easy to answer these questions and to figure out what to do.
I really appreciate that you've touched on a broader sense, and I think we're going to come to that, and we're working towards that, of a greater role of what the musician is in society. That it's a bigger role. We saw it yesterday, the power that a musician can have as a contributor to society on a much larger scale than in the concert stage, which of course is also extremely powerful and important. But thank you very much for joining us. I'll move to our next speaker, who I'm most grateful for joining us at such an early hour, and that is Professor Dr. Sheila C. Woodward. Sheila C. Woodward is the Executive Vice President of the International Music Council, which is based at UNESCO in Paris. And she was previously President of the International Society for Music Education. She's Professor of Music and Director of Music Education at Eastern Washington University in the US. A native of South Africa, Dr. Woodward earned her PhD from the University of Cape Town and a Performer's Licentiate in Organ from the Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music in London. She previously taught at the University of Southern California, the University of South Florida, and the University of the Western Cape. She has served on the editorial board of the International Journal of Music Education and the Journal of Popular Music Education. Dr. Woodward's research has two areas of focus: music and well-being, and music impacting social justice. She has presented at universities and professional events worldwide and has published internationally. Sheila, thank you so much for being with us this morning. You're the arts and culture education expert on the panel in the broadest sense, perhaps, writing about, speaking to, considering from many angles. I pass the floor to you to share some thoughts or experiences you've had in recent times.
Well, thank you so much, President Benjamin Woodruff, and valued colleagues around the world. Greetings from Washington State, USA. It's really an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you. I never feel like an expert in anything. I think that actually the longer we teach, the more we're convinced how little we know. And I want to speak today from the premise of not only my own university, but what the International Music Council proudly promotes as the 5 music rights. And these include the rights of all children and adults around the world to express themselves musically in all freedom and to learn musical languages and skills. And then also the rights of musical artists to receive fair recognition and remuneration for their work. So that's just in a nutshell. I think that during the pandemic restrictions, this giant leap into the universal online learning world was made. And I wanted to just point out some of the disparities that occurred, because what happens, particularly even in the grades of kindergarten up to grade 12 of schools, has impacted us now at the university level with the new freshman students that are incoming. And so what we found was that, that in these public schools, there was a large divide between those who are economically privileged and then those from the lower income communities, and then also rural populations. Some students had no internet connections at all. Others had little or no access to devices. Many shared noisy, cramped spaces, impacting their ability to focus on studies. You know, we have homeless people trying to study who normally would be coming into school every day and getting a couple of square meals. They now didn't have these. And, you know, the struggles that teachers had to achieve an online relationship with their students, let alone actually motivate them towards meaningful learning, you know, left many teachers feeling like they were the band playing on the Titanic. Beyond that, teachers also found that they were expected to build those lifeboats to sort of guide their students to safety, this being learning how to teach online. You know, I'm very fortunate myself. My previous work at the University of South Florida and Southern California, that I had been teaching online for 20 years, but many teachers had no experience of this whatsoever. And particularly in the performing arts, you know, how do you teach a large ensemble online? And how do you teach applied music lessons to individual students? So, you know, this was where teachers faced enormous challenges. And I think overall, though, the ethics of care kicked in, where teachers instinctively understood what the author Nell Noddings referred to as having to establish a climate of caring, not on top of what we do, but as the very foundation of our practice. I think teachers really have become a lifeline to many of the students that they were reaching. And not only having to put aside their own suffering and confusion, they had to deal with that of their students and cherish whatever meaningful connections they could make, no matter how small. So I think that, multiple students have been facing traumas and crises, loss of family income, illness, death of loved ones, abuse in the home, so much more. And unimaginable numbers really have kind of been battling loneliness, grief, depression, suicide. And these are the students that we've seen coming through our doors as freshmen. And I have personally noticed threefold the numbers of students battling with debilitating anxiety and depression that's impacting whether they can even attend classes ever or even manage to post any assignments online, and we're hoping they're actually learning. But some of them have come in with a kind of this gap in education where they don't have the same skills that they previously, we found students would have coming into the university. And so as teachers, we're having to do some remedial work as well and teach them basic skills in writing, how do you even write a paper, and so many students hadn't touched their musical instrument for 2 years. Well, that took a lot of work to get students back kind of up to par where they could feel they were actually performing in their work at that kind of desired level that we would love to see in higher education. So I think another thing that we are seeing is really a vast increasity in diversity of our student populations. And we are really having to learn that, you don't need to have to understand in order to have compassion. That's something every one of us can find, is compassion and empathy. And as we're helping our students through these times, none of us is perfect. We're making mistakes. But as Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So I think this for us has been, not only at my university, but around the world, really the challenge that teachers are finding of dealing with student realities and trying at the same time to develop the skills of our students and keep our standards being reached. So one practical thing I've been doing during the pandemic was inviting speakers from around the world through online forums like this to speak with our students, to kind of break them out of that mold of that inward looking at me, me and my problems and what I'm having to face and my challenges. And, I brought in Ahmad Samast, who was speaking about, what they were facing in Afghanistan with the National Institute of Afghanistan. And, since again, now they've suffered more recent closure, and through massive international support, many of us have been able to help. And those students and teachers have finally been able to flee their homeland and are now pursuing their art in the safe arms of Portugal and their director. So, and we're taking inspiration from so many really key musicians around the world, like An Chon Pond, who was an inmate of the Khmer Rouge child labor camp in Cambodia, and he's returning to his mission of re-establishing that musical legacy of his ancestors, and passing his musical heritage on to the next generation that was so sort of almost wiped out. And we're seeing people like Mary Cohen going back to teach in prisons. So, bringing people like this into our university through online platforms has really been eye-opening to students, making them think about the suffering of others actually helps students gain inspiration and feel much more empowered with what they actually have, and feel much more grateful for what they actually do have. So I think another key area that, Bill was touching on was how, our boundaries in arts education are being thrust wide open. We have now learned that we can extend access online. And so now we're realizing that not only during that pandemic, but long term, we can accept students who are not traditional. These can be rural communities, people who are confined to homes because they're caring for children and elders, those who have full-time jobs in distant towns that cannot give those up to come into a university town, others who have extended injuries or illness. And this increasing inclusion in our ethics has impacted so many facets, like our audition criteria, opening up to cultures beyond Western classical. It's impacting the very fabric of our curricula and the many things we're trying to encompass in that, and the spaces in which we operate. So as teachers, we've really faced questions on ensuring accessibility also to those with ability varieties. And so, these were skills we had to learn fast. How do we deal with our blind students and those who are hard of hearing? And how do we take what we are doing online and every single document, make it accessible, have captions for every word that's spoken. And these are just key elements that really have challenged us. And fortunately, most universities have given really strong technological training to the faculty. So I'm very grateful for having received that myself. And so we're able to continue that. So I think there are benefits that we're experiencing now, that we didn't know about before, or we may have known about them, but we weren't paying enough attention. Now we've been forced to do that. So I think this is actually some of what's very encouraging about working with our students now. And as we sort of emerging from this global trauma, I think we can see that philosophically, how we practice our art and our art education, that perhaps we have a much greater sense of its value, that we share with our students that healing power of music to our students more, that we give our students more clarity about how artists are actually educating us, the messages that they carry in their architecture, in their visual art, in those popular music songs they hear online. I think we're much more conscious of allowing our students to have space and to practice the art of exercising their voice and develop and creating new innovative work that is really needed to sustain their world going forward into the future. So thank you for this opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate this very much.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, and there's a lot there. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, and thank you for reminding us about the international context of everything. That we're operating here. Some of us are in Europe, some of us are in the US. There are many parts of the world that are not represented here today, and we're very mindful of that. And there's a lot of work to do to ensure that that's improved. And when I was part of the International Music Council for a number of years, it was very important for us we spent, in fact, I think, you know, the majority of our time looking at projects in parts of the world that are not represented and not here. And thank you for reminding us that music happens everywhere and is made by everyone. And that we can learn about one another through our programs, and we can travel with music. It's an incredibly mobile activity and philosophy to be a musician or to be an artist and to consider your space. And I thank you for touching on sort of responsive action, you know, responding to events, responding to situations, responding to crises, and adapting, which is what I think the role of artists and performers are. I'm going to jump continent and jump to Switzerland, where I am. I'm joining today from Geneva, and our next speaker who I'm going to invite to say a few words is up the road in Lausanne, in Switzerland as well. And I'm very happy to welcome Stephen Mccomb, who works with international students, international artists, and is trying to put them in different contexts and trying to make them, I guess, rethink and reconsider a lot of their formal training and assumptions about performance. I'll just say a few words about Stephen, and then I will pass the microphone, so to speak. Since 2017, Stephen Mccomb has served as director of the Verbier Festival Academy, which is one of the world's most prestigious summer music academies. Every summer for nearly 30 years, the Verbier Festival Academy has invited an elite group of extraordinary young classical musicians to the Swiss Alps, where they join a performing arts community and are mentored by the world's top performers, teachers, and music professionals. Stephen brought a fresh approach to the Academy upon his arrival by introducing a 21st century artist curriculum that encourages students to reflect on their own strengths, how their careers can evolve in meaningful ways, and how they can create connections with contemporary audiences. Stephen also launched the festival's Unlimited division, an inventive concept that aims to disrupt norms, push boundaries, and awaken musical curiosity. Prior to this role, for 12 years, Stephen grew the Honens International Piano Competition Foundation into one of Canada's most respected and widest reaching international classical music organizations, discovering, nurturing, presenting, and promoting the talents of concert artists. Music has been central to Stephen's life since taking up piano at age 5. A Canadian by birth, he's now over here on this side of the Atlantic. And Stephen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you today. We've known each other for quite a while through the competition world. You're now welcoming laureates and graduates from competitions and asking them questions, which is something you've actually always done.
Thanks, Ben, and hello everyone around the world. It's good to be here with you. Yeah, I think coming here to Verbier, one of the unique factors is we're inviting some of the very top musicians. So when they come out of conservatory, or if they've won a major competition, they then may come to us, or just before they're entering a major competition, or before they're starting their career as a traditional classical musician. And I think what I say when our musicians, we have about 200 musicians who come to be with us every summer. There are soloists, there are singers, there are conductors. We now have an audio recording program, so musicians who are thinking in other ways and finding new paths for their career as recording engineers. We have 2 orchestras, one for musicians aged 18 to 28 and one for young musicians aged 15 to 18. But I'll speak mostly for the young soloists who I work with most closely, and singers. It's a reality check really when they come to be with us, is that they come to us thinking they're going to be these big stars and are going to have these huge careers just because they have talent, and which is great. And some of them will, and someone will handpick them and say, here, you're going to travel around the world, whether that's good for them or not, or good for the environment or not. and make it. But the majority of them, as we know as music educators, need to find a creative way to make a meaningful career. And I think that's what our role is in Verbier. Is there's always going to be room for the young star who's going to make it. But there's all of this group of talent that has something to give back to their communities and can give back to society. And then we need to celebrate that. And we're not giving them enough of, we're not opening the door. And as somebody asked about how do we teach creativity? Well, it starts with opening the door. And what's interesting in the environment I'm in is this is a summer music festival that has great mentors and performing artists who are doing interesting things. Some are the big stars from around the world. But the fact is, when musicians come here, they actually go and listen to music. And I remember in school how many times there was a great master class being given, and well, it's another master class, I'm not going to go sit through it, or there's a concert. It was always a struggle to get musicians to come hear other musicians. So here in this festival environment, it's a way for people to be inspired. But on the other hand, I think post-COVID, or hopefully post-COVID, we do see in a very practical way that audiences are slow to regain their attendance patterns, and they're used to cocooning at home. And musicians who are with us are asking those questions, the orchestra musicians as well as the soloists and singers. It's fair to say that they're being forced to rethink their roles as artists. So it's not just us saying you need to, but what we're hearing now is the musicians are actually thinking this way, which is, I think, very healthy. Yeah. And so with this in mind, what we're trying to do is stimulate reflection, have an environment where people can think creatively about what it means to be an artist. So I think what Karen Zorn said yesterday from the Longji school is asking the artists what gives them joy as musicians. Why are they doing it? I think a lot of the young musicians I see, they're doing it because their mom and dad wanted them to start lessons and wanted them to keep taking lessons because they didn't want to waste their money. And that's not a good reason to be a musician. And more musicians who have something to say, and something to say in their local community is so important. It doesn't mean that if you don't have an international career, that you're not a successful musician. And I think just having this conversation about having a meaningful position in your community with the people around you, as we've talked about, playing in hospitals, playing in schools, inspiring a new generation is so important. This year, for the first time, we always now ask our candidates, and we receive about 1,600 applications every year for about 200 positions in the academy. And we ask them now what their role is, as some of you have already said, in community engagement and giving back to the community. What does it mean to you to be an artist? And for the first time this year, there were so many of applicants that are doing good work now that we said we need to start building a creative project development residency. So we now invited musicians who want to develop an original project that maybe celebrates traditional cultural values, cultural heritage, and unraveling social issues, to develop that project throughout the festival, to workshop it, to discuss with musicians who are more established on how they can develop something that's meaningful. And we treat that as an example for the other musicians who may not be ready for that yet. We have musicians who are aged 13 to 35, so it's a big age range. Certainly those who are 13 or 14 or 15 are not ready for that conversation maybe, but that they see their peers starting to think in those new ways. And that's what's so important, I think. Yeah, that's good enough, I think.
No, it's fantastic. I don't want to stop you. I sort of want to draw out a couple of things that you've mentioned. And 2 points. I've been to Verbier. It's a fantastic setting, and I think there is something about taking artists away from their everyday and putting them somewhere else and changing things up and putting them up close and personal with audiences, and realizing that there's audience education as well that is important for the arts and the cultural sector. It's not just the artists themselves, but it's about educating audiences to change habits or to change perceptions of new work and new creation. But I want to touch on two quick things. The first being what I really like that you've achieved at Verbier is you're putting these academy students in unusual performance settings, or unexpected or non-traditional performance settings. And how was that received when you first implemented this concept?
Usually they think we're crazy. So, you know, it could be anything from to get to Verbier, you have to take these ski cabins down from the valley up to the hill, and then you can even go further up. So one project that we've done is a musical ride where musicians with their instruments are in these telecabines, and the public just come in and they have a conversation now it can be very loud in these telecabines when you are playing violin, and for the pianists it's difficult. We hand them a toy piano, and but it's really talking to audiences about what it is to be a musician and what they're doing in the community, why they're there, and that starts with that. It's just opening the dialogue. And of course, yes, we have musical hikes through the mountains where maybe musicians are playing in certain spots. But of course, even in a nightclub environment, just getting musicians to think in new ways of how to present music and how to reach the public. The whole idea of the audience being an integral part of what it means to be a musician has been lost, I think. So, and to bring that back into the conversation is so important.
The other point I'm going to press you on is something that you and I both have spent time on and had experience with, and I want to applaud you for fighting for it a number of years ago, which was actually asking questions of musicians when they applied for a competition, more so than just performance. You were assessing them on performance plus, performance and there was resistance to that.
Well, I think, yeah.
And I'm not wanting to go into specific detail, but I think knowing who the musician is, knowing who the artist is, knowing what the artist stands for, I think is more and more what audiences not only crave but deserve. And this connection is crucial. Why do we make art? Why do we perform? It's surely not just for ourselves. And this dialogue that you've been pushing for a long time, I think super valuable.
Well, I think what's important is it comes back to the first thing I said, is young musicians who want to be professional musicians in the classical world have to realize that there's only so much room for the Yevgeny Kissins in this world. And you're not a failure to have a career in a smaller place. More and more, the best performances I see are in more intimate venues and more intimate, where there's storytelling and there's a real connection between audience and musician. And I think in the end, the musician gets more out of it too.
I'm just going to mention we've had a comment in the chat space, and a contributor has mentioned that in the Bahamas last year, the Nassau Music Society had a great idea of taking music to the public by having 3 classical musicians ride a bus for several hours and performing in the bus and engaging and talking with the bus riders, which seemed to be very well received from both travelers and performers. I keep writing meaningful down. That word has come up so many times from previous speakers, and I'd like to move to somebody who wears multiple hats and is also attached to a conservatory setting, and that's Stefan Frucht from Germany. Stefan, I'll just introduce you, and then we'll get started. Hello, Professor Dr. Stefan Frucht received his violin diploma from the Universität der Kunst in Berlin, and he studied conducting at the city's Hans Eisler Hochschule für Musik. Parallel to his musical training, he has also studied human medicine at Berlin's Humboldt-Universität, where he obtained his PhD in 2002. Shortly thereafter, he became the expert advisor for the German Parliament's CDU-CSU faction on the Culture in Germany Enquete Commission. Not only is Professor Frucht a musician, he is also a cultural manager, an author, and the publisher of a large number of music productions. There are numerous recordings he has conducted featuring orchestras such as the Orchester Akademie of Berliner Philharmoniker, of Bayerische Staatsoper, the Deutsche Symphonieorchester, Rundfunk in Berlin, and the Deutsche Oper Berlin. He is an honorary professor of the Musikhochschule Karlsruhe, chairman of the Association of Hochschule für Musik und Theater München, and board member of trustees at Berliner Staatsoper. Besides this, he holds many honorary posts on management boards or advisory councils and gives lectures at the Harvard Kennedy School in Cambridge, as well as at the European Business School in Berlin. Since 2015, Professor Frucht has been artistic director of the Siemens Arts Program and head of Siemens Culture and sponsoring programs. Stefan, you have many hats. You are a musician and a doctor. I wanted to bring a diverse range of institution and conservatory-based training, and also grants and sponsorship and mentorship training. And I'd invite you first to say a few words about the Siemens Arts Program and why you chose to be part of it and where you see it fits in cultural education.
Yes, thank you so much, Benjamin. First of all, I really appreciate your German pronouncing that difficult broadcasts, institution and so on very well, especially from someone from Swiss. Okay, just kidding. Well, thank you for inviting me. And to be honest, I don't want to deliver such a huge introduction somehow, because this panel is awesome. It's so international, and I'm much more somehow interested of the opinion of you guys all over the world, because I mean, it's quite rare that people like this one come together in these times, and I really like that initiative. So especially the younger ones, I would like to hear their opinion, because I really would like to learn from their perspective as well. So I just keep it with a short notice. Yes, most of you probably know Siemens as a focused technology company, but it's much, much more. And we have a long tradition in music and arts as well, because Ernst von Siemens, who was one of the founders, somehow he really was in the music. And probably some of you might know the Ernst von Siemens Musik Prize, which is so-called somehow the Nobel Prize for Music. So, but we have lots of other initiatives, and also the Siemens Arts Program, of course, but also our Siemens Opera contests, and for example, this month starting again in Istanbul. Always interesting places, because not so many people are considering Turkey as the best place for opera, but this is what it makes interesting in the end. But because no one will tell us whether the next Maria Callas might come from somewhere Anatolia or from Argentina or somewhere, and this is why we are looking and giving chances to those places. But you might also know our concerts in Carnegie Hall once a year, but in general, the Siemens Arts Program is an operative program which is delivering their programs in music, mainly classical music, and then fine arts and cultural education. Since we discuss here and we have so many people from the US, it might be interesting somehow to have in the back of the mind the political system of Europe tradition and American tradition. As you know, in America, most of the art is funded privately. So almost 90%. And this always makes it difficult somehow if you get COVID or something. Some productions then really fail and are gone, so to say. The German system might not be better, but to be honest, half of the opera houses worldwide are based in Germany. So this really costs a lot of money, and so the state of Germany pays around 90% of all costs, and only 10% is private. So you see the vice versa system, which is completely different. If we talk together now, everybody might have another idea of cultural funding in their minds. But coming to education, from my perspective, is very important that we really worldwide, we all here in this virtual room have to lobby for the arts, because it's worth to do. You know, when we see every day, and we experience managers and high-level people in every day, but these times normally they are not educated in the arts and the culture anymore, and this is a problem. And this is why the arts program really focuses also on educating high-level managers, CEO, with, for example, with our scene program, which provides some acting lessons and so on. And I always deliver a conducting workshop and so on, because you can teach arts and culture, it's fine, but you have to experience them. Yeah, experience is different, because you never would like to describe a dinner. You really want to have a dinner. Yeah, it's different, and this is why it's difficult that we create these kind of perception. And I mean, we all agree that music and cultural education is so important, it's mandatory, but we all are professors, CEOs, directors, and so on. But what about asking a worker in New Delhi? What about asking a serviceman in Qingdao? What about asking IT specialists in Mumbai? Yeah, these are also the target groups we have to reach and make sure that music and arts is a daily need somehow. So how we can tell the story of music and art as a daily need for everyone, because everyone, remember Yehudi Menuhin, everybody who is playing an instrument at this time, he cannot be in a war. So of course we have so many enemies in this respect, and this is first of all COVID, this is the Russian war, and this is also Netflix. Because once people got used that all the content is coming home with Netflix, they don't go to concerts anymore. I don't refuse digital developments, not at all. We have to make new digital offers to the people. But you know, the value of arts has to be made clear. Arts has a certain value, and it costs something. If you see, take a Bruckner cycles. I mean, today you can download the whole Bruckner symphonies, the 10 for 10 euros, and you can have it for by streaming for €1. So nobody can produce it for that kind of money. And you know, and this is my last comment. Some people say it's too much to have. At least in Germany, we have 64,000 professional musicians. It's a lot, and they have to earn money somehow. But you know, nobody would ask, why do we have 180,000 consultants in Germany? Yeah, they also have to earn money, and do we need all those consultants? So nobody would ask that. So my goal is, I'm driving at, is that the worth of music and arts and the lobby of these value. So, and I would like to take this chance here worldwide to lobby again in our respective countries to make not only education, to provide education, but to create demand for music and arts.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I could not agree more. And that's, I guess, in many ways, the principal reason that we're holding the discussion we're holding today under the UNITAR platform, which is not only to recognize that education is important, cultural education is important, and for a better society, but also putting it on a visible platform to highlight its value to a broader policy-making audience and decision-making audience. I think you're absolutely right. Audience habits have changed enormously. The consumption of art and the consumption of culture has changed, and how we prepare what we do and still make it incredibly special and balance balance reach and experience at the same time is, I think, the future opportunity for our sector, because I think people do crave experiences that perhaps they don't know they could have or need. It's up to us to guide them and tell them and invite them. Working with business is something I think is crucial, and we can't do everything alone, and we need support, and we need all sectors helping to ensure that our work is seen and integrated. And it's something that our next speaker lives and breathes, and has integrated into a school of management. One of the world's top business schools and top schools of management now has a Master of Arts in Management and Administration course, thanks to our next speaker, who is Professor Andrea Rurale from Milano in Italy, from SDA Bocconi. It's attached to the Bocconi University, and is a dedicated school of business and management, but now has its own master in culture. And I applaud you, Andrea, for sort of continuing exactly what Stefan was saying, which is to highlight the value of what we do in business settings as well as cultural settings. I'll say a few words about you because you're also attached to a conservatory, president of conservatory in Cremona, so you can speak from both sides. I think all of us wear multi hats, and you can speak to that too. Andrea Rurale is a lecturer at the Department of Marketing, and I'm sorry, my screen has changed. Just excuse me one sec. There we go. A lecturer at the Department of Marketing at Università Bocconi. At SDA Bocconi, he is the director of the Master in Arts Management and Administration. He has conducted research and education projects with major enterprises. His research activities focus on cultural marketing, consumer behavior, experiential marketing, CRM, and marketing communication. He's been a visiting professor in many international universities, such as Simon Fraser in Vancouver, Tsinghua University in Beijing, SMU in Dallas, UTS in Sydney, and Universidad de Aguascalientes in Mexico. He is president of the Istituto Musicale Superiore Monteverdi Conservatory in Cremona. And Andrea earned a degree from the Università Bocconi and a PhD in marketing from Universidad de Valencia. Andrea, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us on your vacation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I think it's really important to me that you wear the two hats. You know what musicians need through your role in the conservatory in Cremona, but you also know about the importance of telling the story of culture and the value in financial terms as well as experiential terms of culture and the arts through your teaching and your lecturing. I pass the floor to you to share some thoughts.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and it's a pleasure to meet online so many distinguished speakers and participants. Thank you for the messages I'm receiving. I think if I just I can ask to Pelayo Alvarez if you allow me to share my screen. It's easier for me to scroll the few slides that I prepared. I would like to start. Let me double check. No, I cannot. I can't still.
I think it is probably on its way. It might just take a minute to.
Okay, I manage. Okay.
Yes.
I manage, and so it's. Perfect. Okay, so I was saying that I started and I'm actually a professor of marketing in a management university, and as in many universities all over the world, you know, the university all over the world, you teach theory, and most of the time the programs have a connection with a particular field. So there are students interested in fashion, in design, in cultural policy, international institution, and also in arts and culture. But during and so art and culture and performing art was at the beginning actually the field where to apply the theoretical model in management so far. But then it happened that as Benjamin was saying, I also was chaired to participate to some activity of the ministry regarding the Conservatory of Music. At the moment, I am president of the Conservatory of Music in Cremona. Cremona is the city of the violin. It's a city that is completely connected and arranged with the music and, of course, the strings, the place of Stradivari, place of Monteverdi, and so on. I discovered that there is another perspective through which people that is working in the education should look at the issue. The fact that a lot of students that are studying music, people that are studying to learning how to sing, how to play an instrument, how to restore an instrument, they lack completely, for sure, in the Italian system. That was a starting point. A focus on some tools that are necessary, because the Conservatory of Music in Cremona, for example, has a very high ratio of selection. It's a small one, and there is a huge amount of people that want to study violin in Cremona. They know how, they learn how to play violin, but at the end of the course, at the end of the 5 years program, they are in a way thrown in a market where some of those can arrive to a top level performance. Most of them are in a way looking again for a shifting career, for how to position themselves in a market that is extremely competitive, for the many reasons that all the distinguished speakers that spoke before me have properly mentioned. They don't know, for example, how to present and promote and evaluate what they are doing, are practicing. They don't know the soft power of culture, the soft power of music that is important also for reaching, as empirical evidence proved so much, the well-being of a community, of a society. And so what I would like to pose and to the table for the discussion is that management that most of the time has been considered something that is opposed to art and creativity and freedom of expression is actually essentially important for the complete and well-rounded proposal. Therefore, in this actually situation where an artist, I did also with visual art, but as we are talking about performing art, is realizing step by step that the value of the way that they play the 24 Caprice by Paganini is something that has a value per se, but is also has a value for somebody that needs to appreciate it. And therefore, if he's not able to rely on somebody that, for example, promote the value of the execution, or he's not able to promote and to convey the importance of that value, the values is expressed by himself, but doesn't arrive to the final target audience. The environment, well, people that is dealing with art, and so also the performer is described is really multi-phased. There are plenty of models. This is one how to describe the environment of the art. Consider all the social economic environment that is important for the arts management. Art is at the moment, and music is only a part of the wider portfolio for people that wants to spend their time. So it's not a paradox when we say that going to a concert, it was mentioned before Netflix, going to a concert in 2022 can be an alternative for some particular people of going to watch a soccer game at the stadium or going to Disney World and so on. The gender roles and the family, the concept of society, and the first step for the family is actually completely changed. The aging population trend. Every theater in the world, particularly in Europe, has a great problem in the gap between the subscriber of the theater, very old, very rich, very how can I say, retained by the theater and the young people that it's very difficult to reach and to bring to the theater if they don't have an education that allow them to go there. And also this so wide international representation and differences in culture, where if you put together in a class a musician coming from India, I recently have an experience in the Indian music experience in a museum of music, a project of museum, a musical museum in Bangalore. And that has the great role of putting together and trying to find out a link between the Indian music or the Indian system of a variety of music performances and the Western is something that for sure requires a discussion and way to really to put together people coming from different places. The issue of technological development, just some examples, virtual reality, the way to broadcast, the fact that considered how Netflix is proposing something that the customer wants, because they are very, very, very into understanding the tastes of the testing and preferences of the customer through an advanced CRM system, and the role of the theater. Does the theater need to propose what the visitor, the audience want in order to have a fully booked every single day? Or instead, an opera theater has to invest in promoting and produce something with the risk of having not so many people in the audience? It's a doubt, and it's a dilemma that if you play, if you perform, but if you are in a system and you are not only you in front of your sheet of music, you need to take into consideration. It was mentioned also before, the fact that the economic environment is extremely important. A performer needs to know that the art has, in some situation, has a support from the public sector, and in some other not. And so the orientation to the market, the orientation to the art orientation to the market are topics that needs to be taken in consideration. We talk about the mold disease since 1967. So the illness of a sector that is not increasing productivity because it's based on such a personal service as the performing arts sector. And still, most of the time, performer, musicians are not aware of this. And if you want to transform your art, the way you produce music into a system that is sustainable, so you want to, some of our students want to create a music school in their country, or they want to create a group performance group in their own country. This information is are absolutely important. This is connected also with the political situation, but I would like to conclude this really general overview of my really humble perspective, because I have a diploma in oboe, so I also in the past wanted to become a musician. I was not so talented, I couldn't get to a proper orchestra. This frustration, in a way, pushed me during my activity, during my study, when I started dealing with numbers, figures, finance, management, and so on, to want to be immersed in the beauty of the music. And so I started helping cultural institutions, theaters, organizations in music to find out their way to success, because apart from being a job, was for me a way to have back the possibility to be immersed into beauty. I conclude with this key issue that everybody that is dealing with art doesn't need, but is definitely immersed every single day. It's art needs to be supported or not supported. Before the COVID, most of the researchers were very, very into the model of the taxation in the US that allow private capital to enter inside the performing arts sector. During the COVID, it happened that because of the theater had to close for the pandemic, we started looking at what happened in Europe with the parachuting contribution coming from the minister as something that was in a way the heaven for theater themselves. So even though they were closed, even though there was no audience, the ministry at the end of the year kept this support. But obviously this implies the relation with the politics, it implies the relation with the spoil system in appointing the people that are managing the cultural institution and so on. Therefore, also, it's important to understand that at the end of the day, we talk about management, but we need to consider that the role of the performer, the role of the music creator, the role of the theater in a wide sense is to produce something that is considered to be culture. And the role is not the one of satisfy as the main stakeholder, the public system that is supporting it. So this principle of the arm's length is something that the performing art professional needs to consider. A very, very, very important and constant issue that we found in our activity talking with students in our class, so with students that are oriented in having some management tools, is the excellence versus accessibility or professional versus amateur art. What is the best way, the best definition of the professional artist versus the amateur artist? And the amateur has a role that is, by definition, lower than the professional or not. I remember that I'm simply posing problem. I don't want to stand in a way or another. I'm just saying that this issue needs to be discussed, talked, and for the people that is into music and art education are things that needs to be thought at least. You cannot be indifferent. Like excellence versus accessibility. You have a performance, in Cremona, the city where I had the conservatory, it's a small city. In Cremona, everybody is educated to listen to music. The first time I went in a church where there was a performance where the young musician of the Conservatory of Music, everybody was very properly facing and participating to the concert, clapping the hand in the proper time, more educated versus La Scala, for example. Expert audience. But on the other side, if you want to bring people and to give to young people, for example, people that have never listened to classical music, making them understand why the music is so important, you need to be able to provide way to access. And this is actually the opposite way. Again, these are topics that needs to be taken into consideration. What is the relation with this new art form? Like in the visual art, the non-fungible token or the crypto art played an important role in this recent year. What is the impact of technology? We always could describe as the presence, participating in presence in a concert. Much better than listening it through an online registration or a distance, for sure. But it's very important to consider that this needs to be turned in the value generation process into an advantage, the presence of technology, not something that needs to bring performing art into a nostalgic form of only in presence, otherwise it's not good. Equality and inclusivity, and then also something that this is my personal, academic lament, the fact that most of the time when we teach this, it's very easy to talk to manager that wants to learn about how to be manager in the performing art or in the visual art, rather than talking to people that is very, very keen and professional in performing art or in visual art, that need to realize that these management tools, this perspective is absolutely important for the value generation. And this resistance to marketing and management in a general sense is really most of the time quite difficult to reach. I really thank Benjamin for this opportunity, above all, and really sincerely for the kind of panel and the great information that have been presented before me. So that I took notice about, and I will be happy to share the slides for your easiest convenience. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Andrea. It's fantastic. Thank you for clearly demonstrating the key things that we're all thinking about and we're all talking about, I believe, and have been for a while. What I would love to jump straight back to Tanya and say, I want to know more about what's in this boot camp. In your, what does the boot camp look like that you've put in place at Considerata Skilled? What was the first thing you put into it?
Well, I mean, we've divided it into 3 categories. The first being, how to create, just an edge in the marketplace, talking about earning money and setting yourself apart from others, so even as much as just asking these musicians to create their own personal budget, like how are you earning money? I think even just putting that down on paper so that you understand the multiple platforms often necessary as a musician to even, many of these younger musicians are being, helped by either the school or by parents at the beginning. But if you have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, how are you going to eventually, realistically make a living? So obviously with that, and then we talk about exactly what many of your amazing speakers have today. What gives you joy? What gives you connection? If you don't feel the connection, how do you transmit that connection out to an audience or in terms of creating ideas? So we do a lot of public speaking, a lot of kind of brainstorming and learning from each other. And then we also have something similar to what Stephen was talking about at Verbier. We have a new program that will be developing innovation and social impact projects, so that by the time they leave our roster, they not only have a portfolio of performances, but they're also thinking more broadly. And I think, musicians in general have this kind of almost holy mindset of not wanting to think about money, but it's so important to think about that, not only for yourself, but also in the marketplace, because so much of that now is necessary when you're being empathetic towards audiences and presenters that are going to be, hiring you. You've got to be thinking about what sells tickets, what people are interested in, what you can bring to the table. And so I think that musicians need to be taught more for-profit thinking, certainly for themselves. So that's a lot of what we're doing, and also just thinking about programming and how to be viable long-term and more empathetic towards, as you've talked about, audience connection. And then we very much are trying to look for partners now in more the educational sector, where we're really reaching far beyond our roster. And said, I think like anything, it's always good to hear from multiple sources beyond your institution, the same message. So that's something we look to do. That's why I think, it's amazing that you're having this conversation, because I think there needs to be much more conversation and actually much more partnership and collaboration, so that we know what's going on at the different levels of these young people's lives, so they can make real contribution, not just through their 20s but beyond. We're often so obsessed with this up to the year, the 30-year age bracket, but often the most fruitful period of someone's career can be beyond that. And there's so little support also, I think, and this is not something that we do at Considerata Skilled, but something I think about, is how do you support musicians beyond that period and beyond the deadline for competitions, in terms of what you can compete in, because so often that's when things really start to marinate and to come together. But as this practical question of how do you earn money comes into play, that earlier. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's all linked to value. It's also linked to value of yourself, value of your work, value of where you are. And we have a question related to wanting to do a deeper dive into the reluctance for marketing theme that Andrea brought up. But I'd like to open the floor to any of the speakers, or in fact anyone in the room who'd like to add something to or make a contribution. Stephen.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to something Tanya said, and it does cover this sort of marketing, reluctance to marketing too. Is one activity we now do with our students, and it's a luxury because they have so many concerts that they can attend, but is to, and I think it's a good exercise for any young musician, is to go to a concert and forget about anything that happens musically in the concert, but from the very first step, from getting your ticket, going into the hall, sitting down, when does the concert begin? Does the concert begin when the artist comes on stage, or is it your whole experience of going to a concert? Because now, as an audience, it's more than just, you know, we used to say you have 10 seconds to make everyone love you as you come on the stage. Well, now it's even before you get on stage. So if you're the presenter of the concert or you're presenting, you have a responsibility as an artist to make it that magic experience that you want it to be.
Would anyone like to comment to that?
And easier said than done.
Well, it's something I'm actually very passionate about this, so I would like to talk to it, but I won't because but I couldn't agree more. I think we need to know what we present, why we present it, to whom we present it, where we present it, and the concert experience or the artistic experience is more than just the performance. Tanya,
I know, I just was thinking, you know, I think that the musicians often think of marketing as self-promotion and they don't think of it as sharing and really thinking about how they're connecting with their audience. And that's really difficult because we have such a perfectionist mindset on what we want to put out to the world. And so, yeah, it's tricky, but I think there's such an opportunity with technology now to communicate.
And can I add
please.
something?
Of course, please.
Sorry, I think that actually, for example, this topic was when the concert is starting, when you're on the stage or before. I mean, literature regarding the experiential marketing, the experience when marketing started being considered as a focus of the activity, not only the product, the iPhone, but a service or even the experience. The starting point was to consider that the consumer process of purchase was divided into 4 steps. So the pre-purchase, the purchase, the consumption, and the post-consumption. And so if you apply it actually to the theater, before even purchasing the ticket, there is an experience. And when you have to market something, in this case, the concert, your performance, if you have in mind that there are 4 moments, and so 4 ways in a way to relate to this in people that would like to have the possibility to buy the ticket, but also the purchasing process, the very moment of purchase. So how long does it take to get into the system online to buy it or to queue? Are at the ticket office is in essence in La Scala, for example, in Milan, there is the queue that for the premiere is organized every 7th of December. People wake up at 4 a.m. to queue to get a ticket discounted, and this is an element, a component of the experience of the premiere. So these are examples of something that are very easy to be taught in a context of, Walmart, completely product-oriented field, but are extremely relevant for somebody that is dealing with performing art.
So I have a question. United States, I see quite a bit of marketing with, okay, we're talking about marketing versus performance, but we see quite a bit of marketing flyers and Twitter and various things, and not the type of performances that the type of marketing says that it's promising. So there's the flip side to that, that we, there is this tremendous technology and the ability to reach people. So is it your marketing team that's selling what you're doing and we're getting a substandard product? Or is it an opportunity for all that are involved in a music strategy or something to be in on that? Because it's difficult, once you get to the stage and everything and all that promised on this beautiful flyer and everything, it's just not there. So are we contributing to that?
And thank you so much for that contribution, because authenticity is crucial, and when I say consumers, I'm talking about consumers of culture, audience goers, people who enjoy performing arts. Consumers are extremely savvy and aware, and authenticity is crucial. I mean, I think it's Andrea touched at the end on his slides about quality, like the quality of the product, the quality of the performance, the quality of the artist is there, and that has to distill all the way down. And the artist's voice, I think, should be leading everything. It's not always the case, but Bill, would you like to?
Yeah, no, I so appreciate the question. This is something we all, I'm sure everyone on the panel thinks about often. As the attendee just remarked, I mean, you see these sort of posters and you show up, you're thinking, this is gonna, and then you show up and the event itself is sort of the same old wine, and you think the bottle's gonna be different, but it's the same old wine a little bit, and because at the end of the day, so much of the actual things that artists do is this very traditional sort of thing. Show up, sit in the dark, play canonical rep in the dark for a silent audience that sits there and then goes, and I'm not impugning that. I'm not impugning that at all. I am observing though that how to put this? We've all talked about the changing, digital landscape and all. The thing that I genuinely wonder about is when the birth cohorts who are truly raised online, who are raised staring at these things nonstop, getting constant visual stimulation, the notion of sitting still in the dark for an hour is an increasingly foreign cultural practice. And, we can kind of lament that, or we can adapt to it. And this really gets to, I appreciate so much of what Andrea was saying in his remarks about thinking about the technological as not just a means to deliver the traditional, but also as fundamentally generative, creative built into the act itself. I'll just make the observation that, working in a conservatory environment with 18 to 21-year-olds, they arrive knowing how to do this already. I mean, they're just doing it. And a lot of what we try to do is give them time and space and a creative environment where they can do it and get out of the way. And on the one hand, I'm so hopeful about the future because seeing what the young people are doing, but I'm increasingly unaware that I don't have the answers. I mean, I'm in my young 40s and I feel like a different geological epoch than them, because I wasn't, my formative years, I wasn't socialized and raised in this online medium. I think it's a fundamentally different thing, but I deeply appreciate the point. I mean, I think that authenticity marketing is important. I think the next big changes will be the actual change in the substantive experience itself, and maybe then there will be that alignment between marketing and the experience.
Personally, I think there's an enormous difference, an enormous opportunity between the difference between digital performance and then live performance, and it's up to us to ensure we know what we're dealing with, and storytelling is digital and performance is performance. I think we have great opportunities. Sheila, please
well,
add to that.
Thank you. Perhaps just briefly to mention that we can really be aware that our audiences are a political statement. I remember when I was 19 taking a young man of another race to the city hall to hear the Cape Town Philharmonic Orchestra at a time when it was actually against the law to be on a stage with somebody of another race or be in an audience with someone of another race. And over time these kind of parameters and laws change, but today are our audiences comfortable to dress according to the gender with which they identify? who's in our audience? Do we have young people in the audience? Do we have people of the many minorities and cultural diversities that reflect the greater society? And in fact, are we only performing in a concert hall? Or, you know, as Stephen was saying, and he's trying to encourage the young performers coming into his institution and his competitions, are they performing out in the community? Are we taking our music, instead of educating students with this idea of we need to get better so that we can be better performers? How about educating students about the gift of music they give back to the community? You know, whether that's in audiences, low income areas, old people, people who cannot get out of their homes. Let's think about those ways to radically change our artistic practice and make it accessible to all.
Thank you very much, Sheila. I'd like to post and ask Palayo if it's possible. I'd like to pull up and put on the screen as part of this conference. Thank you. Here it is. This is a key element of the work of the International Music Council. And the Music Council actually prepared and ratified these rights many years ago. But so these have been in place for a very long time at the council. And I think it's worth just taking a break and acknowledging them, that because I think they're broader than just music. I think they're cultural rights in many ways. And they talk to expression, education, access, quality of artistry and communications, and also to obtain just recognition and fair remuneration for work. So value recognition in all senses: market value, self-value, self-worth. Perhaps some of the issues that Sheila was talking on about, societal issues, can be assisted through cultural education in this way. So I always take a chance to remind people that these rights exist and have been around for some time. And I think it's worth reminding all audiences that culture is intrinsic to what we do. Thank you, Palayo. I'll share the link to that for all attendees, and also follow up to this conference. Andre, you're unmuted. Does that mean you wanted to raise you're welcome to say something? No,
I had to be back to mute.
Okay. Grazie. I would like to I think, you know, Sheila, I mean, it's the question that came up earlier. We've got a number of things, which is meaningful, value generation, curiosity. These points have continued the whole way through, whether we're talking about the educators, the artists themselves, or the audiences. And I think there's some of the key points to take away as priority focuses for what we do in our sectors. I'll do a sort of formal thank you to UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, for building the platform to today's discussion. I'd like to thank our wonderful partner, Ambassador Suazo, who is the head of office for UNITAR in New York, for making today possible, for celebrating this partnership we have with UNITAR, and for joining forces with educational institutions that are like-minded and want to put culture front and center, and the value of culture front and center. So thank you to Palayo Alvarez, who's made sure that everything's run smoothly. And thank you in particular to all of the speakers for all of your contributions, for all of your thoughts, for all of your different experiences, and actually for all of the work you're doing on the ground in various ways to ensure that we're producing vibrant, relevant artists to fill our spaces for the coming future. The Global Foundation for the Performing Arts hosts these on a regular basis, and we have other activities involved with courses and educational partnerships. But again, I thank UNITAR for putting culture front and center. And I think, yeah, we're getting many comments. Sheila, thank you for what you were saying about acknowledging all sorts of audiences and acknowledging all sorts of cultural experiences. Thank you. Stefan, we didn't have enough, or perhaps, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap?
No, thank you. Wonderful discussion, and take care wherever you are.
Great. Well, thank you once again to all of the speakers for taking part, to Tanya Bannister, to Bill Quillen, Sheila Woodward, Stephen Mccomb, Stefan Frucht, Andrea Rurale. Thank you so much for being part of this. And I think it's really fitting that I'll just read out, for instance, we've had a message now that one of the attendees' expertise is in dance, but they've found all of this equally as applicable to their discipline. So thank you for sharing all of your experiences. We will continue to make sure culture gets viewed and treated as it should, and we'll continue in this space. So thank you very much, and we'll wrap there, Palayo.